Thank you for tuning in to the Athletes Portal Show. I am your host, Keith Williams, a father of two athletes, talented athletes, a basketball player and a track athlete. The Athletes Portal podcast is a show about what's going on in youth sports. We interview the community that leads and supports the success of student athletes in the classroom, on the field, and life after sports. The community, that is coaches, high school level, college level, and AAU. We also interview trainers, mental health professionals, NIL agents, and videographers. And most important, parents who have raised successful student athletes. Make sure you tune in because the guests that we have on this show share what it takes for student athletes to succeed in today's world. There's no theory here, just reality. Today's guest is a videographer from Atlanta named Sosuke, otherwise known as Sauce. Please welcome Sauce to the podcast. Sauce, how are you today?
Doing well, man. I appreciate you having me, Keith.
Definitely. I think we connected through my son's tournaments at AAU. I used to see you on the sidelines.
And I've always heard about Jackson. My brother was his age. Growing up, I always heard about Jackson.
Definitely.
It's kind of full circle to be here right now. So.
Yeah, it's a small world. I got to ask you something. You filmed a lot of people. Have you ever filmed any high-profile athletes, whether they be professional or that?
Yeah, I've worked with a few NFL talents in the past, working for a podcast production company. Also worked with a lot of big-time NFL and NFL and NCAA trainers. So, I've been around a lot of high-profile athletes, kind of been, blessed to be around their environment, so it's been nice to kind of work my way up the ladder from, shooting high school games when I first started to where I am now.
Definitely. And how did you get into shooting sports?
Funny enough, so it all started. I was when I was playing football still, we'd have film session and you have huddle and you see all these, everybody makes mistakes in the game. And, I would just, find a clip of, my teammate dropping a pass or missing a tackle and make it on iMovie and just, make fun of them. It was something we did just in a group chat just to mess around. And one of my old AAU coaches, Iron with Georgia Legacy, had seen one of those. And he was like, hey, you want to see if you can make me a video for my team? So I showed up with my iPhone, probably 6 or 7 or 8, and showed up, made a little video. And ever since then, I was like, oh, this is fun. And then by the time it was my senior year of high school, after football season, I was done with basketball. I was fully football at that point, committed to go play football. Bought myself a camera to make some money before, college. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just put my all into this. And instead of going to play football, I just committed my all to this videography side of things.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of your videos, and you're really talented. Definitely something you're passionate about.
Appreciate that.
Did you do courses, or did you do more self-taught?
I like to say I went to YouTube University. A lot of 99% of stuff I've learned self-taught or, through YouTube videos, whether it's a tutorial or just, growing up an athlete too, I feel like you kind of become a visual learner naturally. So I think it's something I've kind of been able to transition into my career as well.
Yeah. Now, do you have a preference for equipment? Obviously, there's Canon, Sony. What do you like to use?
I'm a Sony guy. I'm a Sony guy through and through. Yeah, started with a Sony A6300 when I first started, and just worked my way up. Now I'm at an A7 IV, but about to go get FX3. So it's been a nice way to work up for sure. But I'm purely Sony guy for sure.
Yeah. So tell me, what do you enjoy the most about filming sports and the work that you do?
I think honestly, just being able to give people the platform, whether it's a kid or a college athlete or a pro athlete, to just put their name out there. And with the space of NIL becoming so big nowadays, I think that's really where I decided to put my own all into this, was because, I saw the opportunity I could give even kids I grew up playing with, that were a year or two younger than me, that were about to head to college. I knew giving them the social media platform kind of helped them go into college and make extra, almost 6 figures or whatever it is. But it's kind of saw the value of the presence of digital presence for these athletes nowadays. And so that's really why I got into this whole thing.
Yeah. Do you find that, that the importance of getting to know the athletes or to be around them, to be able to understand how to get the best out of when you film them? Like, do you have like different approaches for various athletes?
Yeah, I would say, just kind of seeing how athletes operate. Having been a team sport guy my whole life, you can kind of see some guys are more locked in, quiet. Other guys like to be, for lack of better words, kind of extra in a way, be flashy with it, look at the camera, point at the camera. So I kind of, play it by day, kind of, as I get to work with an athlete more and more, I kind of see the vibe and kind of read as well. But I try to be invisible, and I think that's something that some people are against. But personally, I try to be as invisible as I can when I'm shooting content. Obviously, people are going to point at a camera. People are going to see me and, wave, smile, do the little hand stuff, whatever. At the end of the day, I try to be as invisible as I can to kind of make sure everything is purely about the athlete and nothing to do with, I'm just the guy behind the scenes that way, if that makes sense.
Definitely. No, that does. So you're using more of like a Zoom to be able to do that because, in order to do that, I guess you've got to have a distance.
Yeah, yeah. I'll get up close and personal, when it makes sense, pregame stuff, when people are getting locked in, getting in their zone. I like to always, obviously, kind of get a little more closer up shots, but, I don't try to be talking to them where, oh, look at me, look at the camera point, this, that. So I think that's something that I've gotten to learn over time, to be kind of just a natural eye in this whole thing and not force any interactions to get extra content, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. What do you think makes some, because there, obviously there are a lot of people who are getting in this business. What do you think makes somebody an elite performer in your line of work?
I would say just, knowing how to talk to people, as much as it's a videography business, at the end of the day, I think it's more about sales and marketing, and to be able to just push that value of what your content provides and what your platform provides is really what separates, I think. You can have somebody so talented and make a Netflix movie caliber content, but if they're not putting it out in the right situation, right market with the right intent, it's not going to get anywhere for these athletes. At the end of the day, what we're doing, at least in my field, isn't about putting high quality content as much as it is pushing the kids and putting the athletes on the platform that it needs to be put into to give them the extra value and, maximize everything that they're working for. And so I think that's kind of the approach I think that separates the elite guys from just people that are starting up, is just being able to push the athletes rather than, push too much about, oh, look at my high quality video, and putting it in the right situation.
Definitely, definitely. No, that makes sense because it is about the athlete and it is marketing because essentially, as you know, 3% of athletes, I know at least in basketball, and I think football, 7% make it to the college level. And so they need all the visibility they can get. What do you think, in sports now is the most challenging to film and
Ooh, I think like
you film multiple sports.
a hardest sport, I think obviously track is an interesting one. You only get one shot at it. If you're shooting somebody that's running the 100, that's a 10-second, a 12-second thing, So it's like you can't miss anything. You have to be, everything's locked in. You only get one or two races per meet. So, I've done track so many times, but you really got to make sure you're looking at the heat sheet, making sure I've shot for Kennesaw State before. And it's like, okay, well, I got to get the girl running the 100, but then I got to get the javelin guy on the other side and then go to the throwing pit, get the shot put guy. So track was an interesting one for sure, especially when you're shooting for a whole team. That's a pretty hard one, I would say, just from just balancing everything. And then obviously lacrosse is another one that I've shot that is kind of used. I've never played it, so it's kind of hard to see something develop. So it's so fast paced and the ball's moving so fast. It's something I'm still adjusting to get used to for sure.
Yeah. And I would imagine lacrosse, the field is big. So how do you know where to position yourself? Like on the offense side, defense side, or?
Yeah. I like to say like midfield to start so you can kind of get a little bit of everything. And then once you get, obviously the goals are going to be the biggest thing. So once I get a few goals from, even from the offensive side of the field, then I'll kind of work my way back to get some defense clips, stuff like that to kind of work it in. But when I'm working for singular athletes to highlight them, that's when I'll really just pick what makes sense. If I got a defender, then I'm obviously going to lean towards the backside of the field to make sure I'm getting that athlete. So I would say kind of situational, but kind of working through almost like a progression and kind of making sure I have the right shots needed to get everything on paper.
Definitely. Something that surprises me today is there's still a lot of athletes who don't have film at the high school level. Can you tell us the importance? I know why, obviously, it is to hire a videographer, but can you tell us the importance and the value of hiring a videographer to get film for your athlete?
Yeah. So obviously, for one, like you always want to have film to send to these coaches. If you're trying to be recruited, whether it's whatever sport it is, you got to have some type of film to be able to show. And what I'm hearing now is these coaches at these college levels not traveling as much to see you as it used to be in the past. They're all through film. They're looking at film. And at the end of the day, that's where they throw their offers from. So, just having somebody, whether it is just the overhead angle, just from, a typical huddle angle, that alone brings value. But by having somebody that's, in my field of work, you can also push everything else that comes with being an athlete, whether it's the emotions, the character, the leadership that you got, everything like that. Now it's more personal, more hands-on, when you can have somebody that's on the field almost, a few feet away from you, just capturing every moment, just interactions, a quarterback, if you're dapping every single one of your teammate up on film and that's on film and that's on social media, that's going to separate you from the three other quarterbacks they're looking at that are, just as talented, can throw the ball just as far, just as big, just as fast. So I think that's really where everything that I bring in value separates you from the other athletes when you have film from, the field or the court and the baseline rather than just, a bird's eye view. But just film in general is just a life changer in what we're living in right now for sure.
Definitely. Definitely. I agree with you because when Jackson was when we were going through the recruiting process, they did look at how he interacts with his teammates. And that was something that was important to them at the college level. And I actually, because I film, I actually would sometimes film him interacting with his teammates and throw that in the mix. And so I do agree with you that makes perfect sense. And I'm wondering also, what do you do when you have parents who can't be at an AAU tournament and they want someone to film their kids? Is that something you're able to do, or is that something that has to go through the actual AAU venue, or is that something you as an individual can do?
Okay, interesting. So, I would say it's obviously where we're at right now, it's oversaturated with people that are trying to get into this market. And so a lot of these schools and events are really starting to get more strict about everything. But I know obviously events usually partner up with a Baller TV, or schools are with NFHS, I believe. So that's kind of more of the typical TV angle, as they say, that you can kind of tune into. It's like a pay-per-view subscription. But I think with what I do in the industry I'm in, it's more about recruiting and marketing and kind of increasing the NIL value while telling the story and kind of showcasing the talent, obviously, that's going to come with the athlete as well. So I think when you're looking for live feeds, obviously, if I'm at a game, it may take a little bit longer just because I'm shooting 4K footage with, different settings here and there. So if you need like a live, oh, I can't make it, it might be a little bit more of a, outsourcing, or I might have a member of my team go out there and just, shoot with a smaller camera just to make sure it gets done quicker. And it's a different operation. But for the main things that I do, it's kind of a separate market for sure.
Okay. All right. No, that's good to know, because I'll tell you something. That was something, we were looking to as a family, my wife and I, for Jackson when we didn't go on the road. And that was something that I always felt was difficult to source because you just didn't know who to get in touch with. So I do think there's definitely an opportunity for you there. It looks like you already know that.
Yep.
At what level do you think athletes should start hiring a videographer? Because we know, obviously, the main recruiting obviously starts in high school. But I'm wondering if you had to make a recommendation to parents listening, when should they start getting film for their athletes?
I would say at the high school level for sure is where I see the most potential. But obviously, just building a social media platform. If you are a kid, for example, like a Colin Ross, where he was already, the height he is now at middle school level or, freshman year, it really, helps put your name out there early to kind of maximize everything that you can get out of it. If you're still younger and, obviously you're talented, but you're a shorter guy or, something like that, that's where social media can really separate yourself early as well to kind of help you put your name out there. So I think I would say 8th grade to 10th grade, that window right there, depending on kind of where your kid is at as far as recruitment goes, how invested they are obviously in the sport, because you don't want to spend all this money pushing the kid just for him to quit his sophomore year, junior year, because they're kind of sick of it or burnt out. So I would say just making sure obviously that your kid's bought in. And once that you really see that, I think that's when you just start pushing everything out to kind of start separating them from the rest of the pool. Because like you said, only 3% makes it. And every school, depending on the sport, obviously, but there's always going to be 10 to 12 guys in the city that you're from alone that are in the same position as you. So just being able to just build that presence early, social media wise, recruiting wise, will kind of separate you going forwards into the recruiting process for sure.
Definitely. Sauce, I got to ask you another thing. You go to these AU tournaments, you're traveling. Walk us through a day in the life of what you do, because it's pretty serious work what you're doing. Just give us a quick overview of what.
Yeah, if I'm a one-man show, I would say obviously first thing I do in the morning, make sure all my equipment's ready to go, batteries are charged, all my SD cards are formatted. I got some space in my hard drive, so if there's multiple games I'm shooting, I got to move some footage over. make sure all that's smooth. Then obviously whatever games I'm at, I'll shoot, make sure everything's done, covered from warm-ups. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is making sure I'm there early enough to get the behind the scenes, whether it's, athletes walking in, the venue, if it's, a beautiful venue, if it's, outdoor sport or indoor court that's got 15 courts, kind of just being able to show the atmosphere within the video, especially working for a team, you kind of want to be able to show that. So I would say just getting there 30 minutes early, shooting everything. And then once I'm done for the day, making sure everything's uploaded, making sure all the footage is obviously stored in the right space and making sure everything doesn't get lost because the worst thing you can do is lose that footage. And so I would say, yeah. And I'll obviously, depending on deliverables for whatever contract I'm on, I might be having to do a live post. So after game 1 and 2, I might go to my laptop real quick and I have a trick called slating where anytime a big play happens, what I'll do is take like 3 shots of just my hand covering the lens. So when you go back to go find the footage, you just see 4 black squares and then the clip before that, that's the one that go post right away. So it kind of makes the flow easier. But so depending on whatever I'm working on, I may, go to my laptop, post 2 to 3 videos, make sure everything's getting that live post, live attention, and then, making sure all my gear's charged for the next day. That's the biggest thing too. You don't want to wake up to an empty battery. That happened to me in Cincinnati. That was the worst thing that I ever had to deal with.
Man.
So, just making sure everything's plugged in is a big thing for sure. And especially if you're at an Airbnb, make sure that outlet's working before you go to bed that night.
Definitely. How many batteries do you bring with you?
So I have it's something called a V-mount battery. Lasts me about all day when it comes to just, it's almost like a power bank for my camera in a way. So I always keep that, but I always keep 2 to 3 spares on me. And that's a lesson I had to learn, doing what I've done for the last few years. So I think that's a big tool. And I think I'm about to go get a second one just in case, because I know how long these gates can get. And sometimes the heat or the coldness kind of, makes the battery drain faster. So that's little stuff I'm trying to learn and adjust as I keep going in this process for sure.
Definitely. And I know that you're having to edit videos and that is a lot of work. Are you finding that there are any AI apps that are helping to speed up the process, or is it still just a long process with whatever software you use?
I would say AI is definitely starting to really be crucial. Like I know I use Adobe for all my footage or for my video editing, for example, or pictures. And I can add for pictures, for example, if I did an engagement picture and there was graffiti on this little, railing, I'm able to just go AI remove it rather than having to do all the old school work of, masking this, blah, blah, blah. I can just go in, AI it out. So that's been nice on the photo side. Video side, obviously masking stuff. If you're familiar with that, it's kind of like when you kind of trace people out as they move. That's been able to be done by AI, which has helped me, do some cool effects in the past. So that's been nice. And then Premiere Pro just added a feature where I can AI extend audio and video. So that's been something I'm trying to explore a little bit before I really fully use it. But it's something that's on my table now as well. So that's something I'm trying to utilize when necessary and when I see fit. So
definitely off to YouTube University, right?
Yep. That's what it is.
Self-taught man. That's very, very efficient. So I got to ask you as we're wrapping up, what's next for you? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Where are you trying to go?
I would say just keep growing, working with just networking, making sure I'm in the right spot at all times and, just building a network of just other creatives that are trying to do what I'm doing. Because I think, as you get to bigger projects and contract work, it's just going to be, you're never going to be able to do it by yourself. And so, just building a crew and a network of other creators, just making sure I can have a team, whenever there is a big contract that comes my way, or when I have like, for example, this past weekend, I covered a 7-on-7 tournament. I was able to just go get a photographer to come with me and a second videographer, for example, and just be able to, just make the production that much better and make sure that, the person I'm working with is just getting that, just everything that they need rather than just, oh, wait, I can't only be on field 1, field 2. I wasn't able to cover that. So just, growing a team together and just working with people that are like-minded, just working just as hard to kind of just build networks and relationships. And then just working, I'm with Phenom Hoops now as the regional director. I don't know if I haven't really made it public yet, so nobody really knows.
Congrats.
But I'm working on the AAU side, just helping run tournaments over here now as well. So that's another step that I'm taking, but that's kind of separate from the video side. But obviously I'll be helping with video production as well, but just, operation, running tournaments down here, trying to take over. So that's been my next step for sure.
Definitely. And I'll say this, the network is so important because you have to trust these folks to be able to do a good job. So, you're not bringing just any photographer or any other videographer. Like, you've got to have a way of, how do you vet them? How do you know? Is it just you've seen their work, or how do you know
Yeah,
who to
I would
bring?
say it's just like recruiting, you kind of look at their film, look at their work,
Yeah.
and then kind of take a look what they're working with, obviously get on the phone with them or have a relationship with them, meet them at tournaments or, just events in general. You always run into 3 or 4 guys every time you go shoot a sporting event. So just making sure, you connect, you talk, and just get to know the guy, man, or girl, whatever it is. But, just making sure you get to know them and kind of see what they're working with. Technology wise as well, making sure their equipment's up to par with what you need, and then just seeing what they're producing, kind of working from there.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Do you have a favorite venue? You've been to a lot of different AAU places. Is there a favorite city or a venue that stands out to you?
It was nice to go to. I would say when I got to go to Indiana, that was great
Okay.
at the Pacer Center. I grew up there, so it's kind of nice to be in the Pacer Center to
Nice.
cover sports at the same time. So it's kind of a full circle moment for me.
Nice. Nice. Excellent. Well, so thank you so much for your time. Please tell us before we go, how can people find you?
On my Instagram, that's kind of my main page is sos.mixes or sos mixes. That's kind of my, main almost gallery in a way. And then obviously my email is sosuke.camera@gmail.com. That's kind of where, all the real work comes into play. So that's my two point of contact for sure.
Excellent. Well, Sos, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast, and I wish you continued success.
I appreciate that. Right back at you, man. And keep doing
Thank
your
you.
thing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.